Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond the Box Score, and I am your host Hayat. Today we're breaking down 3 college basketball matchups on March 12th, and on today's slate we're digging into Creighton vs Seton Hall at MSG in the Big East Tournament, Bowling Green vs Toledo in the Mid-American Conference, and UMass vs Miami, Ohio in a matchup that could turn into a scoring track meet. As always, this is just me connecting the dots in real time, looking at the spreads, the totals, the trends, the scoring environments, and asking one simple question: if these matchups play out the way the data suggests, what does the game actually look like? And real quick before we dive in, the channel is pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy these full slate breakdowns and the thinking out loud style analysis, hitting that subscribe button really helps the channel grow. Alright, let's get into it and start connecting the dots. Creighton vs Seton Hall. The lean here is the under 135.5, with a slight lean to Seton Hall minus 2.5. Let me walk through why. So we're headed into MSG for the Big East Tournament, and when I start breaking this down I immediately look at how these teams have already matched up, because we've seen 2 meetings this season, and both of them were tight, really tight. The first matchup happened at Seton Hall, and that game finished 56-54. Seton Hall winning by 2 points, which already tells me something about the style these teams play against each other. Then the second matchup came on February 7th at Creighton, and this one flipped the other direction with Creighton winning by 1 point. So across the 2 meetings, we're literally talking about games decided by 2 points and 1 point. That's razor thin. When I see margins like that, I start thinking about tempo, execution, and defensive pressure, because those games usually aren't flying into the 80s. Now the market right now has Seton Hall minus 2.5 with a total of 135.5, and when I zoom out and look at the overall seasons these teams have had, the gap is noticeable. Creighton is 10-21 ATS, which is rough. That's been a team that hasn't rewarded people very often. On the other side, Seton Hall is 20-11 straight up and 18-13 ATS. So if I'm thinking about the side purely through the lens of season performance, I do see why the number is sitting at Seton Hall minus 2.5. But what really connects for me in this matchup is the scoring environment, because Seton Hall games have gone under 19-12 this season, and then when these 2 teams specifically meet, both meetings went under. The first game already gave us 56-54, and that's not just low scoring, that's a game where every possession matters. Now we're moving the stage to Madison Square Garden, neutral court, Big East Tournament, and if this matchup plays out like a typical tournament grinder where teams tighten up and possessions slow down, the pace becomes huge. And pace is exactly where this gets interesting, because both teams play at a slow pace. That naturally pulls possessions down, which means every empty trip matters more. Then I layer in the defensive profile. Seton Hall ranks 13th in adjusted defensive efficiency, which is elite territory defensively. If this matchup plays out like the earlier meetings where Seton Hall's defense controls the rhythm and forces half-court basketball, I can easily see why scoring could stay suppressed. And the other piece I keep coming back to, the projection mentioned is both teams expected to be in the 60s. When I run that scenario in my head, if both teams are sitting somewhere in the 60s, that lines up perfectly with the kind of grind we already saw in 56-54. One path I see here is another possession-by-possession game where neither offense really pulls away and every bucket is earned. Now on the side, I do lean Seton Hall minus 2.5 simply because 20-11 straight up and 18-13 ATS has been more consistent than Creighton's 10-21 ATS. And if the game stays close again like the 2-point and 1-point margins we already saw, Seton Hall might be the team that edges it. But when I put everything together, 135.5 total, under 19-12 in Seton Hall games, both meetings going under, Seton Hall ranked 13th defensively, both teams playing slow, and the expectation that both teams land in the 60s, yeah, everything keeps pulling me back to the same spot. That's why the lean here stays under 135.5, with a slight lean to Seton Hall minus 2.5. Next we have game between Bowling Green vs Toledo. The lean here is Toledo minus 1.5. Let me walk through why. So this one sits right in the Mid-American Conference, and I'll be honest, this conference is one I always enjoy breaking down because the games can get weird, tight, emotional, especially when we start getting closer to the conference tournament environment. And right now the number sitting there is Toledo minus 1.5, which basically tells you what kind of game this is. It's essentially a spot where the game requires picking the winner because the spread is so small. So I immediately start asking myself, if this matchup plays out the way the programs historically trend, who actually wins the game? And what connects for me first is the history between these teams because Toledo has beaten Bowling Green 7 of the last 10 times they've played. That's a pretty strong sample that tells me something about how these programs match up year after year. But it's not just the head-to-head. When I zoom out and look at the conference picture, Toledo has finished ahead of Bowling Green for 6 straight seasons in the Mid-American Conference standings. That's not one season, that's not 2 seasons, that's 6 straight seasons, which says a lot about the stability of the program. Then I keep going down the timeline and it gets even more interesting because coming into last season Toledo had won 3 or 4 straight conference regular season titles. That's sustained dominance in the league. Now sure, they were a little down last year, but one path I see here is a team that has already corrected course because the note here is that Toledo has jumped back to their old selves and is playing good solid basketball heading into the conference tournament. When a program with that kind of history starts trending back upward heading into tournament play, that always catches my attention. Now on the other side I do acknowledge something important about Bowling Green. They are vastly improved and playing a lot better this year than in past seasons, so this isn't the same struggling version of Bowling Green from earlier years. But when I start looking at how they perform in tight spread environments, this is where things get interesting because Bowling Green is 1-5 this year in games lined between -3 and +3, and that matters here because this game sits at Toledo minus 1.5, which falls exactly inside that -3 to +3 range. So if this matchup plays out like other tight line games Bowling Green has had this season, the history says those spots have been tough for them. Then I layer in the program stability. Toledo finishing ahead in the conference standings 6 straight seasons, winning 3 or 4 straight conference regular season titles coming into last season, winning 7 of the last 10 meetings, and now playing good solid basketball heading into the conference tournament after being a little down last year. When I connect all of that together, in a game where the line is Toledo minus 1.5 and the matchup essentially comes down to choosing the winner, yeah, the path that makes the most sense to me keeps circling back to the same side. That's why the lean here stays Toledo minus 1.5. Quick pause for a second. If you've gotten even one lean you like so far from these matchups, hit the like button. That tells me these full college basketball slate breakdowns are worth doing. And if you're new here and enjoy this style where we just work through the numbers and scenarios together, hit subscribe as well. The goal right now is 2K subscribers, and it might take 1 second for you but it honestly means the world to the channel. Now we have UMass versus Miami, Ohio. The lean here is over 164.5. Let me walk through why. So when I first look at this matchup, the market is sitting at Miami, Ohio minus 7.5 to minus 8 across all books with the total at 164.5, and right away my brain goes to the scoring environment because if this matchup plays out like the offensive profiles of these two teams suggest, we could be looking at one of those wild up and down games where possessions just stack up. I mean, start with Miami, Ohio. This offense has been ridiculous. They just put up 110 points versus Ohio. Before that 74 points versus Toledo, 69 points versus Western Michigan, 74 points versus Eastern Michigan, and then you keep scrolling through the outputs and it's 91, 86, 90, 90, 73, like this team flat out scores. And when I see that kind of consistent production, I start thinking about tempo, shot volume, and rhythm, because teams that can hit numbers like 110, 91, 90, 90, they're clearly comfortable pushing the pace and creating scoring bursts. Now flip it to the other side because this isn't a one-team scoring environment, UMass can shoot too. They just put up 94 points versus Ohio, and when I look at the season numbers, they've shot 46.9% overall this season, including 35.4% from beyond the arc, and they're averaging 80.5 points per game. That matters because if this matchup plays out like a typical offensive rhythm game where both teams are hitting shots early, the pace naturally accelerates. Then you add the Miami, Ohio scoring average which jumps off the page, 90.9 points per game, and that's number 1 in college basketball. When one team is averaging 90.9 points per game, number 1 in college basketball, and the opponent averages 80.5 points per game, the first thing I ask myself is whether the total reflects that environment. The number sitting there is 164.5, which is already high, but if both teams play to their offensive identities, you can see how the scoring climbs. Now the side is where things get weird because the line is basically around 8 points across the board, sitting between Miami, Ohio -7.5 and -8, and honestly I keep circling back to the same thought. This is just a tough side to call. If someone forced a direction, UMass +8 would be the lean simply because getting +8 in a game where both teams can shoot and where scoring variance is high can create weird outcomes late. But what connects for me here is the scoring profile. 110 versus Ohio, 74 versus Toledo, 69 versus Western Michigan, 74 versus Eastern Michigan, 91, 86, 90, 90, 73. Plus UMass scoring 94 versus Ohio, plus 46.9% shooting, 35.4% from 3, 80.5 points per game. While Miami, Ohio averages 90.9 points per game, number 1 in college basketball. If this matchup plays out like those offensive numbers suggest, the pace and shot making can push this game well into a track meet. Yeah, that's why the lean here stays over 164.5. Alright, that wraps it up for all 3 college basketball matchups on March 12. Creighton vs Seton Hall, Bowling Green vs Toledo, and UMass vs Miami, Ohio. As always, this was analysis and opinion only, nothing guaranteed, just me working through how these games could realistically play out if the matchups and numbers unfold the way they look on paper. I'm curious how you're seeing these spots, so drop a Z in the comments and let me know which game stood out to you the most or if you're looking at one of these matchups differently. Those conversations actually help sharpen the breakdowns for the next slate. And if you enjoyed this raw, thinking out loud format, make sure you like the video and subscribe. The channel is on the road to 2,000 subscribers, and every single one helps push it closer. More breakdowns like this coming soon, same deep dives, same real analysis, right here on Beyond the Box Score.